Happy Manga Monday! And today I'm going through another shelf in my manga library collection. So previously I've tackled a couple of bookshelves on my channel. If you haven't seen any of these videos, I just usually go shelf by shelf telling you, admitting really, which series I've read all the way through and which I've regrettably not, And yeah, you guys seem to like those videos, and since it's spooky season, I decided to highlight my bookshelf that features spooky, dark, horror, survival type stories, all that jazz. And for this particular bookcase, I decided kind of mid-year really that I didn't want to just do what I previously did in these videos. I wanted to challenge myself to read everything on this bookshelf. The whole bookcase. I want to be able to go through it all and say I've read every single series on it. So did I manage to do this? You will have to stay tuned to find out. But first, I'm going to start by going through shelf by shelf and telling you every series I'd already completely read before this year, 2025. And then I'll go back up, work my way back, and we can find out if I conquered the bookshelf. So, starting from the very top of the bookcase, first up we have Alice in Borderland, one of my most favorite survival game stories, and I have talked about this one extensively in a video all on its own, as well as my top 10 completed series reads. Do you have the same manga taste as me? But let me just say in this video that Alice in Borderland is full of great psychological horror, building tension, explosive and dynamic action, and amazing characters to carry you through. And the cherry on top for me is it actually has a very satisfying conclusion. Something that you might not find that I have to say about all the survival game stories in this video. Directly next to Alice in Borderland, we have PTSD Radio. I also talked about this one, though it was quite a while ago, in my Cute versus Dark Halloween Rex video. So check out that video if you want more Halloween-y read recommendations, but this one probably wouldn't have made my recommendations if it weren't for the third and final volume of this series. The previous two volumes are okay in my opinion. They're full of short stories that all seem to kind of almost interconnect, yet not quite. They do have certain themes in common, or themes that reoccur a lot throughout the short stories. However, when you get to that third volume, the tone and story of the series totally changes. It gives me like Blair Witch vibes, like documentary style horror of the supposed creepy things that happen to the mangaka themselves while writing this, and ultimately explaining to us readers why they aren't going to continue writing any more of PTSD Radio. So whether this is true or not, it did sufficiently make me intrigued and a little creeped out enough to make the short series worth the read, in my opinion anyway. If you enjoy horror manga like I do, then you also might enjoy it. After that is an oldie but a goodie, The Drifting Classroom Perfect Editions. I do really have to point out how much I love these hardcovers, from the gorgeous detail wrapping around the covers to the cascading font on the spines. I don't believe I've actually talked about this series in a dedicated video, except for the haul in which I got the final two volumes in. This one is a series that, while I have issues with outdated themes, stereotyping, and gender roles given out to characters, and overall just feeling misogynistic, I was still sufficiently transported into this weird premise of a classroom along with their entire school building, seemingly being transported to another dimension. And from there, trying to figure out where they are, what happened, and most importantly, how can they get back? Crazy, dangerous situations arise to impede the kids, and infighting amongst the students begins, with some characters descending into madness. Overall, although I have issues with this series, I can say I found it to be a fast and easy read that I was able to lose myself in. Moving on now to the next shelf. And though we started off really strong, 3 for 3 on the top, I have to admit that before 2025, I had not finished a single series on this next shelf. I had started Shibuya Goldfish. I'd already read the first omnibus of King in Limbo back in the fall of 2024, I believe. And a long time ago, I had also started Hellsing. But I hadn't read them all the way through. So I'll have to, hopefully, return to talk about those. And then the shelf below that, I'd also only completely read the short 3-volume series, The Tree of Death, Yomotsu Hegui, following police officer Nawa Kanetsugu, who lost almost everything when his wife and daughter were killed. All that remains now is his insatiable desire for revenge, but his quest for vengeance takes a turn when he ends up in the middle of an endless war for the fruit that grants immortality. I really found this dark fantasy fascinating, and the art, which was the reason I picked it up in the first place, is phenomenal. I just wish the third and final volume was instead split into 2 volumes, giving us a 4-volume series overall, and being able to expand on and take our time with the events and characters as the conclusion to this one ramps up. Still, I overall enjoyed this one and have kept it in my collection because of that. I also don't think it's featured in a video, but I could be mistaken about that. Sometimes I forget which manga series I even have talked about on here. Though I'd read at least the first volume of all the others on this shelf, I didn't finish them, so I'm gonna have to move on. Second, from the bottom shelf, I'm beginning to redeem myself by having previously already read Parasite, one of my favorite horror series, which I've talked about multiple times in videos, most recently in my top 10 video along with Alice in Borderland. So I'll just quickly say that this series starts when parasites fall to the earth, taking over human brains and thus blending in to society, assuming the original identity of the host bodies they now control. Except for one young man that a parasite tries and fails to take over his brain, instead trapping him in his arm. It's creepy, it's full of body horror, it's not for the squeamish, but it's so dark and so interesting. The premise is, like I said, one of my favorites, so I cannot say enough good things about it. Please, if you haven't read it already, just go check it out. And then on this shelf, I've also completely read Monster, which begins at the end of the shelf and continues on to our final shelf. I also talk about that in the same video that I talk about Parasite and Alice in Borderland in. It's another top tier horror for me, though it's a horror that's more rooted in human nature and psychology. Its mysteries are gripping and engaging, and again, I 100% recommend it, as I do all works I've read by Naoki Urasawa, which brings me to the final series on this final shelf, and luckily one I had previously read. 20th Century Boys plus 21st Century Boys. A series that is told by jumping back to the past and exploring how a young group of friends growing up in a small town has a ripple effect on the events happening in the present, which are perpetuated by a doomsday cult with a sinister plot to destroy the world. This Urasawa title is again steeped in mystery and intriguing characters. I enjoy the jumping back and forth from the past to the present to glean more information concurrently alongside our main character, who is trying to piece together their memories of their long ago past to prevent this potential disaster. It's a little more out there and a bit of a campier plot and premise overall as compared to Monster, and it didn't quite make my top 10 complete series, but it's close behind, and I really found this one to be an entertaining read as well. So that concludes part 1 of this video, and would have been the typical end of my bookshelf tour, but not for this particular video. Now has begun the challenge portion. We will go back up the bookshelf and see if I have indeed managed to read every single complete series on it. Starting with the final Naoki Urasawa title on my shelf that I hadn't gotten to before this year, Pluto, Urasawa x Tezuka. This series takes place in an idealistic, supposed utopian society in which robots with artificial intelligence work together with humans. But there is tension lurking beneath the surface, and someone or something has begun killing the most powerful of these robots. Again, we have a great suspenseful mystery, and though it is probably 3rd place overall in the Urasawa works I've read, I still thought it was a compelling and interesting one. I recently talked about it in my recap of all the sci-fi summer reads video, so go check that video out if you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts on that series, as well as the next series on the bookshelf, Neon Genesis Evangelion. So I struggled and failed to finish the anime of this series, but before I'd even attempted to watch the anime, I had already bought the manga and decided that I should give the manga adaptation of the anime a fair chance. In this series, our protagonist Shinji evolves from apathy to finding purpose in protecting others as humanity faces apocalyptic third impact, where human emotions could lead to destruction or rebirth. A series about giant mecha robots piloted by human children. And although I have complicated feelings about the manga series, I have to say, I finished the manga series, yay, and B, I definitely did get invested in this series, especially as it goes on. So again, I did, all in all, enjoy this one. Now, stacked above on this same shelf, we have 2 short 3-volume series. First up, Manhole, which I read in September, and though it was a quick read following 2 detectives investigating a series of murders and uncovering a deadly biological agent that threatens a global pandemic, I can't say I loved it. It felt pretty predictable, and I never warmed up to our 2 detective main characters. The antagonist was, in my opinion, pretty obvious, and his plan was, well, it was kind of convoluted. So although I didn't hate it, I have to say I have no desire to reread it ever, and that means it's on the chopping block, most likely to be in my next unhauling video, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss that upcoming video. Should be dropping either in December or early next year in January. Yay! But back to my bookshelf and the final short series on this tier, Leviathan. God, I loved this one. Sure, I have minor nitpicks. I wish, again, like Yomotsu Hegwe, it was 4 volumes instead of 3, just to give it a bit more build-up and time with these kids who become stranded in the middle of nowhere on a spaceship called the Leviathan. Still, it's an effectively gripping and thrilling psychological sci-fi horror set in space. I read the 3rd and final volume for my sci-fi summer challenge as well, so it's featured in that same video that I previously mentioned. Next shelf up, and I had a lot of series to tackle on this one. So first up, Angels of Death, another survival story, but with a kind of twist, if you will. Faced with a murderer on every floor, can Rachel Gardner make it out of this twisted game? Honestly, once the quote-unquote twist gets revealed in the last couple volumes, the series is at its best, but since it's spoilers, I won't get into it. And I also really enjoyed the art of this one. However, overall, I don't get it. The series is kind of meh overall in my opinion. Rachel ends up teaming up with the first murderer on the floor she encounters, Zach. They have a weird bond I never really get, but do kind of warm up to, and I do think the ending works, but the beginning is just so formulaic and kind of dull, to be honest, that even though I warmed up to it by the end, I don't feel I have a desire ever to return to the series because I still have to get through the kind of boring buildup. I also really don't get the motivations of Rachel and Zach, nor the reason this whole Saw-esque torture floor structure was even put together in the first place. I don't know, it lacked some depth in the motivations and characters, especially in the beginning, and so all in all, I'm pretty sure I'll be unhauling this one despite the gorgeous covers and gory but beautiful artwork inside. Next to that series is Wonderland, which I read for a reading challenge last month. And can I read 7 complete series in 7 days? So yeah, check that video out if you want to hear even more about this series and a couple others and see if I completed that challenge as well if you haven't watched it. But if you did see that video, you already know I really loved the concept for this one, where Yukino wakes up suddenly miniature sized and has to navigate a much more dangerous world. Sadly, it really devolves for me and loses me completely by the end. I'm not a fan of it, but I'm unsure about unhauling it at the moment because I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for a twist or a take on anything Wonderland, especially when it's dark and horrific, but we'll see. And continuing on in the disappointment chain, we have High Rise Invasion. Honestly, this series earns the award of most disappointing of the bunch. Despite some unnecessary fan service, I was really growing to love this thrilling and nuanced survival game story where people have been unknowingly and suddenly teleported to a dangerous world full of skyscrapers connected by rope bridges and patrolled by intimidating and lethal people wearing masks who will either try to kill you or lead you to commit suicide. Trapped in this ruthless, twisted world, the effect is creepy and off-putting, and the deeper you get, the more layers to the world get revealed. So it was only making me more interested. However, if you wanted an actual conclusion to this story you were reading, well, you'd be shit out of luck. Yeah, it just ends. The goddamn series just ends, guys. Like, they're still trapped in the world. There's no concrete answers or resolutions. Just that's all, folks. Like, excuse me, what in the actual fuck? It seriously pissed me off so much. Like, a rushed ending would be a little sad, maybe, left a sour taste in my mouth, but no actual ending? The audacity. Why? Based on Amazon reviews, it didn't seem to bother other people as much as it bothered me, but I would never personally want to waste my time rereading 21 volumes. A lengthy series to invest your time in, may I add, to have no conclusion for it. So this will definitely have to be unhauled. But moving on from that and making our way back to the first actual shelf on the bookshelf, and redeeming the streak of dark series is our next read, Hellsing. Another series that I read for my challenge of 7 reads in 7 days. You probably see by now why I picked certain series, and that it was very intentional now. But anyway, back to Hellsing, which was thankfully a fun time, a fun dark read. The art was impeccable, and this bloody horror vampire story was action-packed and hell of a good read. I would definitely recommend checking out this classic manga for an epic battle between Protestants, Catholics, and the Third Reich, and sprinkle in vampires. It's kind of chaotic, but in the best ways. Next, we have King in Limbo, which I finished the final 2 omnibuses for Sci-Fi Summer as well this year, so it's also in that video I have previously mentioned a couple of times. That video was very intentional as well. Part of the reason I came up with Sci-Fi Summer was to get my butt moving on some of these series, as you can tell now. So this one I'm torn on. I liked the art, our 2 main protagonists, and the setup of this one a lot. There was a sleeping disease that terrified the world, and to cure it, one has to dive into a person's subconscious, their trauma, and now suddenly a new strain of this disease seems to have returned. That's all really good in my opinion. However, the execution of who was behind this second wave of the disease felt clunky, unearned, or well executed. And the addition of a gross age gap, groomy feeling relationship from one of our main protagonists past bugged me as well. So do I keep it or do I unhaul it? I'm on the fence about it at this point. But what I am not on the fence about is our second to last series on my bookshelf, Shibuya Goldfish. This was yet again another series I read for my 7 complete reads in 7 days video. And this one is a survival story with giant talking man-eating goldfish, which was as absurd as it was horrifyingly fun. I have to say the second half let go of some of the horror and tension in place of a more action-packed and idealistic second half, but I didn't mind all that much. It's not the best nor most impactful survival story in the genre by any means, but it was a fun time, a fun read nonetheless. And that brings us to the last series on my dark horror bookshelf, Basilisk. So, did I read it? Yes! I actually read it back in May, and honestly, for some reason, was the catalyst that made me decide to do this silly challenge in the first place and want to conquer this bookshelf. So back to Basilisk. Is it any good? Well, this one suckered me in with the summary of a centuries-old ninja clan rivalry erupting into a battle royale. I love a good battle royale. And pitting star-crossed lovers against each other in a fight to the death. The covers looked cool, and the story sounded dark, bloody, and up my alley, especially with that little twist of romance amidst chaos. Like, I was sold. I got it a couple years back, used off of eBay, and I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. I found the character designs really unique and were definitely eye-catching, if not aesthetic or pretty. They were still very dynamic and appealing. The story just felt a bit lacking. Maybe because I never really connected or felt concern for our star-crossed lovers and didn't really get invested in the romance. And although some fights were definitely exciting and interesting with crazy ninja, powers and techniques, I wouldn't say this became a fave I can gush about and recommend. However, in the same vein, I didn't dislike it, and so sadly we have to end this video with another title I'm feeling a little torn over keeping in my collection or unhauling. But yeah, all in all, this was a great way to finally tackle some of my ever-growing TBR backlog and feel a bit better about myself for once, that I was able to go through a whole bookshelf and confidently be able to exclaim that I read every single series on it. And yeah, if you've read any of these titles, drop your opinions down in the comments below and let me know, did you enjoy this setup, making like a challenge of reading the entire bookshelf, or do you prefer the old way I was doing things? But I feel like tackling one of my romance shelves would be fun, but I'm also down to just go through shelves like before, where on the fly I just tell you whether I have read or not read the series. So yeah, any and all suggestions are welcome, and I really just can't wait to hear your thoughts. And yeah, if you haven't checked out last Spotlight Saturdays video, go check that out, or last Monday's video talking about dark series that are sadly unfinished but still worth your time. And yeah, that'll do it. If you like the video, please do hit that like button on your way out, and until next time.